Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Cops Canteen show. And this week on the show, we have a fantastic panel of friends to have a discussion around the issue of PTSD within the frontline services. And in particular, what we want to get to the bottom of is how the continuation of people being affected by acute stress affects our performance and pushes us into looking for a place of safety and not asking the questions that need to be asked in a lot of situations. So before we kick off, I just want to introduce everybody who's on board with us today. And today we have Dennis Spaanstra, 30 years in the Dutch police. We have Mads Krarup Nielsen coming on to join us as well. He's ex-Western Australia Danish police. We have Declan Carroll, ex-Garda Siochana in Ireland, an ex-colleague of mine. Myself, Ed Gilbert, ex-Garda Siochana. We have our good friend Madonna Santa, who has 26 years in community development, specifically working with people with trauma, P.T.S.D, and complex needs. We're trying to get our friend Cree in there. We're just having some technical issues at the moment, but he might be able to join us. Murray was involved with the Policing Policy Advisory Agency at the Victorian University of Wellington. So Murray's got some interesting insights there to share with us. And we also, let me make sure I get this right, Harry Hatzikalimnios, is that correct?
Pretty good, Ed.
That's good, excellent. Right, Harry Hatzikalimnios, and Harry is our ex-Australian Federal Police member of 26 years. He also done 5 years with the Independent Commission on Corruption. So that's our team today, and the topic, like I say, that we're going to talk about is PTSD. So we'll break it down into a couple of sections. First of all, PTSD management within the police forces, is it suitable to task? Right, that's the first part. And in the second part, then we just want to get into we're obviously seeing high levels of burnout within the job. So is the management mechanisms not working? And why is there a difference between how PTSD is managed within the job as against when members go to psychologists outside of the job? The third part will be what are the ramifications to the service of provision when we take this into consideration. And of course, with the Cops Canteen show, we always like to establish, well, what can we actually do together to try and improve this situation? So welcome everybody on board. Thanks for taking the time out to join us. Can I just bring in Madonna firstly, just as a fresh voice to the show, because everyone will be sick of listening to myself and Dennis and Declan and our boring drone. Madonna, PTSD. Tell me about PTSD within the police force and acute stress. Is this a real problem, and do you think it's effectively managed within the force at the moment? Have you had any dealing with that yourself?
Well, thanks. First of all, hello, and thank you to everyone for having me on here. It's a real honour, and I know that the calibre of people on here is incredible. So to be amongst you guys is amazing. So your question was particularly about PTSD in the police force. Well, we know, everyone should know, it's post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's a stress disorder that they say is post a trauma, so after a trauma. And certainly I have dealt with, in the last four years particularly, people from all sorts of first responders, so firefighters, lots and lots of nurses, doctors, even surgeons, and of course police members. And it is rife, of course it's rife, because they are the first responders to things that most of us would never see on a daily basis or on a yearly basis or ever, and they're dealing with these things day in, day out, and probably not getting the support, and you guys can speak to that whether they do, but probably not getting the support within that space that they should be, because there's a kind of underlying unspoken rule that they should just get on with it. They should just get on with the job. And so it is rife in the police force. And what happens is, well, here's the thing about PTSD, which you probably all know. It can actually, you can have a trauma or constant trauma and then not even really deal with or even know you've got PTSD until later, 18 months later, 2 years later, 5 months later. So it's a really, really big issue they've got, and I don't think it's dealt with, handled very well within any first responders, police or any of the first responders.
You know, it's interesting, Madonna, that you mentioned that there was a lady that I listened to. I'm a great fan of Dr. Catherine Fines, and she brought up the whole thing about the fight or flight syndrome, which is something that P.T.S.D relates to as well. This fight or flight, we go into this state of trying to escape the danger. And, I just got a definition of it here. A stressful situation, whether environmental or psychological, can activate a cascade of stress hormones that produce physiological changes. Activation of the sympathetic nervous system in this manner triggers an acute stress response called the fight or flight response. Yeah. Now, when I look into this, I looked up a document here, and I'll stick the document onto the links. The Journal of the American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law. They have down here PTSD and acute stress on performance and decision-making in emergency workers. That's the study they have. But they say here that acute stress in these studies is associated with performance deficits, right, in complex cognitive tasks, variable memory impairment, and heightened assessment of risk. Now, I'm just going to, Madonna, if I can just put you off there for a moment and go over to Dennis here. Dennis, we spoke last week about senior management. When guys are coming up towards retirement, they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to ask too many questions. They keep the head down, just to get there in that safe space, get to the pension. Do you think this could be relating to this acute stress, or that the job is a bag of stress? And it's, as in Ireland, what we used to call it was, a lot of fellas become the grey man. That means they don't ask any questions or rattle the cage. They just become the grey man. Do you think acute stress contributes to this? Have you seen this, Dennis?
Yeah, I'm good for a while now, but I have seen this, and maybe one of the causes is also that in the late 90s in the Netherlands, they let go of the fixed groups for the police officers and the fixed schedules. So everybody is, every day you work with somebody else, and that's not good for your safety. It's also not good to speak about things that's happening while you're in your service. And it's not good that the group is strong and can talk about things with their chiefs. And that's gone now. I feel that people are more scheduled individual. It's a difficult word for me, but it's not working okay for their safety.
It's interesting. Can I go over to? I'll go over to Harry there, because you're also a fresh voice to the crew, Harry. Your experience in the AFP, and I mean, all policing. The chief used to be a guy who people used to be able to depend on. The younger members. Has that changed? Is it a case that members are just more concerned with keeping their head down and not asking any questions, just to get through the job, because it's too stressful to ask questions? Is that the experience, Harry, within the AFP as well?
Look, it's hard to say. Look, I've been out for a while, obviously, but I think that would be a factor, and I think with the demands on modern policing and what's transpired over the last 3 years with constant change, I think maybe not working in the same team or whatever, and not be able to discuss these issues would make we're not having the opportunity to bond and discuss things, and not feel that you're able to, because you don't know the people that you're constantly working with who keep changing potentially. Yeah, I think that's another problem another issue that needs to be addressed.
When we have organisations like the Black Dog Institute, we have the blackdoginstitute.org, which is National Emergency Worker Support Services, confidential service there for firefighters, police, state emergency services, forest fire management, and another list of bodies. It says that there's a crack somewhere and something's missing, that things aren't getting treated properly, which brings us on to the question of, well, why are things treated differently inside the job as against when members get, they go for consultation outside of the job? Can I bring you in on that, Madonna? I did speak to you about that earlier on. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, because when you work for a certain organisation, it is in their agenda, it's in their it's what they want to keep you in the job. So when you seek counselling within, because, you know, any job, you can work for local government, you can work for the police, fight, wherever it is, and they say you can get a counsellor in-house. Well, and I know this from experience, that counsellor then works, they're getting paid by your employer to run an agenda, and you may not think this is true, but it does happen, where the psychologists have an agenda to make sure that you're job ready, that you're staying in that job. They don't want to lose, and this is the way I put it to you, Ed, and I don't want it to sound flippant or rude, but they don't want to lose assets. So you've got, you know, a police member who's been in the police force or AFP or wherever for X many years, and you are actually an asset because you do have that much experience, but not if you're broken, so to speak. So it's to get you back on the horse. Whereas if someone comes to me and I'm not my payer, I don't get paid by that particular organisation, then my whole agenda for you, everything in terms of our therapeutic strategy is about you getting better, right? And that's a really different therapeutic modality than one that is about you getting back to the job where, you know, I mean, do they even ask the question, do they want to still stay in that job? And certainly one of the first ways people don't even know sometimes they've got PTSD, you know that, because some of the first symptoms of PTSD is actually feeling tired, feeling withdrawn, feeling like they've checked out of, and they don't understand why this job that they once loved, now they're feeling like tired and withdrawn. So it doesn't always manifest in this fight, flight, freeze mode. It can manifest in anger. It can manifest in irritability. It can manifest in, you know, not wanting to do what their superiors tell them. So there's all of this. It's a strange grey area that has certainly shifted, because once upon a time, PTSD was only labelled for people who had a life-threatening incident, not for burnout. Do you see what I mean? So it could be that you have a member who's burnt out, sorry to interrupt, but just who's burnt out, but they're actually experiencing so much trauma-related trauma, basically, the traumas that they're seeing every day. So definitely there's a different agenda when it's to do in-house. I feel, anyway, I believe, and I know it to be true because I've worked with people, even colleagues who are psychologists that work in-house. And so I've heard the back end of that, you know, which is very, very sad.
Yeah. You know, just going back to that journal of the American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law, you know, yes, PTSD affects members, but it does find that acute stress is actually largely more associated with the performance deficits, that ongoing stress. And that acute stress, from my experience in the police force, definitely could be managed better. You know, so we have police actually thinking with their thinking boots on instead of just with the comply with the direction boots on. Declan, you worked with me for a number of years in the pressure pot that was our place of work. You know, how stressful was that place because of politics at times and just the way things were dealt with?
Well, you see, the thing about it is that I never suffered stress from dealing with the actual job and what I dealt with out and about on the street. That didn't bother me. It was the internal nonsense that got to me. And listening to Madonna there talking about anger and irritability, I felt that an awful lot towards the end where we were, and you can identify with that too. And it is the in-house nonsense that always got me. Dealing with stuff that you deal with on the street, on the phone, didn't bother me because that was part of the job. And I found that I had no faith in going to what we call our CMO, or Chief Medical Officer, because as was just said there, they work for the job. They have a sort of an agenda to work towards. I think one of the best ways to handle PTSD and stress-related issues within the job is to have a complete independent and professional service hired to deal with that. And management then must take what they say on board.
It's very interesting. Declan, what about Mads? Sorry, Madonna, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that is actually meant to happen. So what's meant to happen, especially if say there's an actual critical incident, but you're actually meant to get independent care, a critical incident debriefer or an incident debriefer. It's meant to actually be impartial, and that is why people don't tend to move forward in their trauma, is because it's not impartial, and that's a real problem actually.
You've nailed it. Yes, you've nailed it. Yeah.
And just like what Harry says as well, this whole situation of people being able to talk out their issues as well seems to have gone, because there's a lot of stressors caused by issues which are now considered to be conspiracy theory. And we've spoken about this, where upon reasonable cause to suspect has been replaced with the term conspiracy theory. So we have members out there that are afraid to even think about what is apparent and apply the reasonable concern, because they go to that safety space again. I'm not going to apply my reasonable cause. I'm just going to keep the head down and become the grey man. Mads, you wanted to come in there. I saw your hand up. Mads Krarup Nielsen, are you there with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I can't remember what that was about. There was something earlier. But in relation to this, I think, like Madonna was saying, I think it was that you're an asset. You become an asset in there, so they're just interested in getting you back out on the road as quick as possible. And at the same time, you're dealing with some people who's not interested in being at home and actually getting all that help. They also want to get back out in the car as quick as possible. My older brother did it for many, many years. Like, it cost him his marriage, cost him a lot of stuff, and ended up on the bottle while still on the job. Still didn't get much help in there. And last year in May, we then unfortunately ended up burying him, because then he was finished. But he ended up drinking himself in the ground. Most of it was caused by stuff from the job. Never got the help in there, but every time he got some help from inside of the police, it was with the intention of getting him back in uniform and out on the road as quick as possible, not thinking about what he was actually going through and what was happening in his life.
Yeah.
And they couldn't care less. Yeah.
That's awful.
They sent him to 12 hours of alcohol rehab, and after that, they deemed him all right to get back on patrol. After 25 years of service in riot squads and everywhere else.
And that's the thanks he got.
Oh yeah, not doing that.
Well, they used to just send us into control, Declan. That's what they used to do with us, and then drove us wrong when we were in there.
Well, I love to get into control. I got fed up I dealt with the streets, and then, as I said, what I dealt with in the streets, especially in Kevin Street, didn't bother me. That didn't stress me. What stressed me was the goddamn internal nonsense and the lack of trust in those internal mechanisms.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Sorry, Ed. Sorry.
No, that and with this sustained acute stressors, too much workload, not enough time to do files. They're getting bullied by internal management if they question any of the directions that they're given. So they're pushed into this place of, like I said, that fight or flight, that acute stress. They go for that place of safety and keep the head down. Is this what's happening across society as a whole, though, as well? It's not just the police. If you look at the macro, is this just a micro example of what seems to be happening at the macro level? Madonna, what would your take be there?
Absolutely. It's without a doubt. It's about, actually, I don't know who just said this before, if it was Mads or Harry, but someone just said just then that, I think it was your colleague, from Ireland. Sorry, what's your name?
Declan.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. You just said it wasn't necessarily the job, right? It was the way, the internal politics, because they couldn't be trusted. There was something about trust there. Maybe you couldn't trust your superiors, or there was always internal politics at any job where you go. Always. Doesn't matter whether it's the police, whether it's a local milk bar, it doesn't matter. And the biggest thing you've touched on is trust. If you go to a workplace and you don't trust that the people that have literally, especially if you're a first responder, and your life is actually at stake. You're going out. It's like me when I was a youth worker. Like, you're in situations where you're dealing with members of the public that basically they've fallen through the net somehow with mental health or real criminals or whatever's going on. But you don't have a structure that is there to support you, like as if you're going to do it, be a trapeze artist. If there was no net there, you wouldn't go up there. And so what you're talking about is, for some people, it's not the job. They love going out. They love being a police person. They love working in a milk bar. They love going wherever. But it's their bosses. It's where they work. They don't feel supported. And that is the stress. And that permeates everyone. Everyone's a human being. Everyone goes to work somewhere. And I talk to people where they're not feeling supported. So they have to be in high pressure situations. And let's face it, we have ad campaigns not to be angry at McDonald's workers anymore, not to be angry, because people are venting, they're fuming. They've got the short fuse. You can't drive down the road and not have someone road rage at you, because people literally have a short fuse. And it is 100%, in my opinion, because of adrenal fatigue, which sets off the fight, flight response, fight, flight, freeze, and everyone's at everyone's throats. And so therefore, the people who are our first responders, we actually need them to be able to think clearly. And so I do think it's permeating everywhere in society. And so everyone then becomes everyone's trigger. So I could be like a donkey on the edge and then have to deal with a police officer. They're a donkey on the edge and then we clash because we're both in that mode. Do you see what I'm saying? And so where are the peacemakers?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Can I ask you a question there, Madonna? Yeah, just, I'm looking at one of the effects of this, again, acute stress on performance deficits. And it says here complex cognitive tasks are affected. Is that the same thing as cognitive dissonance?
No. So
different.
Complete cognitive dissonance is when you see something for what it is, and you can't tell it is what it is. So you're saying, I'm dissonant there because I can't connect the dots here, which is what happened during the whole of the last 3 years, right? It's in your face. But the cognitive abilities is saying when your brain is literally your amygdala, your cortisol is through the roof, it actually stops you from thinking correctly. So people forget their words, people forget things, they actually become forgetful. They literally cognitive ability. So I speak to some people with PTSD who forget maybe how to cook, have to look up recipes again. They forget where they're going to work. It is literally that, it is almost like a form, I don't want to say brain damage, but it's like impairing your cognitive ability. It's like I've had people ask their doctors if they're getting Alzheimer's because they forget. So if you think about it in your own life, anyone who's experienced PTSD or anyone who you know has experienced PTSD, they start to be forgetful or not be able to function daily, impaired cognitive ability, because then their functionality, foggy brain, not remembering, getting angry, not being able to get out of bed, wanting to nap in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, feeling extremely tired, being extremely forgetful.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. Imagine you've got someone on the police force and they're meant to be writing a report. It happens all the time with doctors, all the time. They forget to do things. Why? High stress environment, too much on their plate, first responders, cognitive ability impaired. And so you've got people that we need to have high function, like their cognitive function needs to be at a high level and it's not there. You know what I mean? So that's what it means.
It's a fascinating take on it there. I just see we got Professor Murray Cree. Are you with us? I just see him there logged on. Hello, Professor. Is he receiving? Are you hearing us?
Can I just add in something there about what Madonna just said? We also have to add the COVID-19 debacle, the experience around the world with that. People were locked down and put into unnatural situations. I don't think societies all over the world have yet dealt with that, and that also needs to be dealt with. That's also contributing to a lot of stress in all jobs.
100% across the board, and just that whole thing, everything to do with it has caused so much stress, has pushed everyone into this kind of acute stressor space.
People have changed.
I would imagine across all sectors. Yeah.
People have changed.
Yes, indeed we have. I see Dennis there. You want to come in there, Dennis?
Yeah, I want to just start again about the groups, because there's a similarity with society. In 2020, we saw everybody lock down, go to your home, and not talk to each other, right? And this is the same thing that happened in the end of the 90s with the police. Like you worked in the early days, we worked in groups, and we had the older guys with experience, we had younger guys, and there was a signal function in the group. So they talked to each other, and they knew, oh, you have a lot of incidents. Maybe we keep you out of the wind. And if it's if there's a problem with a police officer, the group would see that, and they would talk about it and maybe advise him. And this group is gone. There is no signaling function because everybody is isolated, and this is very dangerous.
Yes, agreed.
So we're obviously we've gone through part 2 of our discussion here, guys. We're going into part 3 now, and part 3 was, well, what's the ramifications to the service ultimately? And I think we're all seeing this across all the front line. Last week we were discussing some of the headlines. 67% of the police force here in Victoria are at burnout. We have 1 in 5 looking to leave the job before the end of the year. This is not in the interests of the people, and having this negative energy out there between the people and the police who are supposed to be there effectively, who effectively are the people policing for the people, supposed to be there for them. You know, we have this situation where it's pretty much being disbanded across the world. We're seeing the same with the Garda in Ireland. We're seeing the same with the English police. All police forces across the world. This great divide has grown, I believe, over the last 3 years since the start of all the Charlie 19 business. What about yourself, Harry? Are you still there with us? I just want to ask your own take again. You've been dealing with fellas in the job in the AFP. Have you seen a decline in service or, you know, in outcomes because guys are just burnt out over the last few years, more so than previously?
Yeah, look, I think it's what we're seeing is the experienced officers are the ones that are critical thinkers, the investigators that keep an open mind. It's what you need to do in this profession, questioning things and whatever. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of those either be dismissed because they didn't want to go down a particular road, or they've left and they've been pushed out. And we seem to be getting, you know, here in Queensland, we're getting international recruits, and they're talking about that in Victoria, and which is not good. And I think what we're seeing is what we've seen in the last 3 years is that the politicians or the majority of the ones that are in power aren't listening to the people, and this is being sort of parodied or reflected with the police management running certain narratives, listening to the politicians or whatever, giving orders, and a lot of police that have pointing certain things out about the our powers and to the Constitution and to our ethics and standards. Management aren't listening to them and telling them, like, just to give one New South Wales commissioner said we're going to treat COVID-19 as a virus, and pretty much said threw the rule book out the window. And I think we saw plenty of examples of that in New South Wales and all over Australia and all over the world. And I think that's what's going on. And, you know, when you swear an oath and you've got the sole discretion, I think that's what's, you know, at the root cause is that all of a sudden there's a conflict with what you've sworn to do, what your superiors are telling you to do, and then you've got to deal with the public and then deal with the reality of it. And I think that's, yeah, probably, and that seems to be playing out in all sectors of society, in all professions. And if you speak out, apart from the internal conflict going on, what you've got to deal with, if you do speak out, then you've got to deal with the ramifications of you making your thoughts known. And I think that's what we're seeing, and what Madonna said, what we're seeing in the heightened clashes, or, you know, with road rage and everything else going in society. And there's also the environmental conditions of, you know, poisoning out there and things that are happening, and that's happening, that's affecting the cognitive function, that potential things going through the blood-brain barrier and things like that. So there's a lot of things going on, and that's contributing to this, and we're seeing it all in the mix now in society at all levels and all professions.
It's fascinating, Harry. I think we have Professor Cree on. Murray, are you there with us? Can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Good on you. Welcome to the show. You have a couple of ex-police here, Murray. I don't know if you've heard the show from the start. Effectively, what we're discussing is members, police members, frontline members who are suffering with acute stressors, which they're subjected to on a daily basis. Is this affecting their ability, to do their job properly? And I know that you had some involvement with on the policing advisory agency with the Victorian University of Wellington. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, and we can have a chat about it.
Sure. I have been doing research work with the Policing Advisory Agency for Australia and New Zealand. Okay.
In terms of what the considerations were for that, was there much consultation with frontline members in relation to how they were being affected by stressors and how how it could be worked around to improve the situation for them?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of consultation, but the other thing about stressors was the recognition of the mental health pressure on policing agencies, jurisdictions, and also the realization that many police officers were undertrained for their jobs.
Yes.
So the consequence was they were being expected to make decisions at levels higher than they were trained to do.
That's interesting, and of course that will put a lot of pressure on the junior members too, that they're being asked to make these decisions.
Yeah, in the Australia New Zealand context, it is my view that there needs to be a university of policing.
Well, I would agree with that. A university of policing. In terms of above and beyond the academies, the university of policing. In terms of,
I think to get the intel up to the right thinking levels to reduce the stress.
That would make sense. That would make sense to me, because there's clearly processes. You've got a couple of police on here, like I said, online, and I've experienced working with Declan over in Ireland, methodologies of middle management that were nothing but, I would say, intimidatory in nature. Would you agree with that, Declan?
Oh, absolutely dysfunctional.
Dysfunctional.
Totally dysfunctional, and you know what we're talking about. Totally dysfunctional, and management didn't give a damn about it because it just buried their head in the sand, as they always do. And that's another annoying thing I found about the whole thing. It was pointless bringing to attention your issues because nobody gave a damn. They didn't want to know.
And again, if you caused any issues, if you asked any questions, you were hammered as well, which forces a fellow back into the box too. Again, it creates that fear. Again, it creates that acute stress.
But we also, I just want to finish on that point. We also have ourselves to rely on too. Over the years, I saw that from a very early stage. I joined in 1983 and left in 2013. I saw from an early stage that you're on your own. I saw that from a very early stage. What I did was I joined a gym, a civilian gym, and I kept that a regular routine of my life right up to today. And that helped me to de-stress from the job. I got to talk to civilians in the gym, and I kept a balance, because it's very unhealthy too to stay in a job and just have that perspective. You have to keep a balance. And that's what I did. That's one of the best ways I did to deal with the whole thing.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the Professor Cree there, just in relation to the University of Policing. So was this proposed, or has this fallen on deaf ears, or has it been considered?
It's under consideration, but there are a lot of competitors who don't want it to occur.
That's interesting.
Why?
It's really interesting.
There's a big interest in it around the whole question of scamming and how that's operating in the Australian context.
Sorry, can you just elaborate on that again, Maria?
What I'm saying is that the whole issue of international cyber scamming and what that means for the Australian population who are naive. So we are seeing scamming results that are unbelievable because of the naivety of the victims.
Sorry, go ahead, Madonna. Go ahead. I'll stand back here. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of that. Yeah.
So what I hear, like for me, what that says is, so you've got a proposal for a university of policing, because that actually is acknowledging that police officers are not either trained correctly or they're undertrained. There's an issue there. You've pinpointed an issue. So they're saying, well, there should be a university of policing where they actually go to university. This is an actual career path that you take seriously, right? And then there's people, there's stakeholders that don't want it to occur, but because of scamming that's, in the Australian context, which is interesting. Does that mean it must be online scamming? I'm feeling like that must be like an online thing. And you talked about the naivety of the Australian public, which I can believe, absolutely can believe, considering that we are becoming a digitised and AI-centric world, basically. And so to some degree, I feel like AI is going to actually take over all jobs, including some of the first responder jobs, because even now you can't even call the police anymore. You've got to put everything online. Like you've got to put, your, unless it's 000, I beg your pardon, just to clarify. But for anything else, there's MasterCard. You go online and you put it in online and then you send it through as an email. So is that what's happening with the scamming? Is that online scamming?
Yes, and part of the online is our lack of business skills to manage the process. And we've just seen a major problem with a major airline called Qantas.
Oh, okay. And so does it sit within the police then to be, it's the police that then look into that?
No, the police are told to stand on the sidelines.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't it? So I see Mad's looking to come in there. Mad, you have a comment?
Yeah, it's just about that university of policing. In Denmark, you changed the academy some years back when they did all that fancy reform of all the rules and the procedures. So now it's a bachelor degree you actually take. But it's given a lot of other problems instead, because you've pretty much eliminated everyone who doesn't have an academic degree from becoming police officers. And in order to fund this, I don't know if it was funding or whatever they've done, but they've shortened the education instead of making it longer. In Denmark, we used to have a 3-year really, really good education that before you were finished, it took you 3 years here in Denmark. But they shortened it down to 2 years. They've taken a lot of more academic subjects and doing a lot more time doing academic stuff at the academy, but have taken away all the critical skills. So self-defense, a lot of these things, people have to do it on their own in their free time. So I don't know if it's a good idea to go the academic way either, because in Denmark, it really hasn't solved the problem of making police any better. On the contrary, it has made them a lot less effective out in the streets, the way I'm seeing it here, by making them with an academic background.
It's fascinating as well, and with the demise of community policing across the board, you know, that connection with the community where we can see where systems are failing and we can try and bring solutions together has been taken away. So we also have a disconnect there.
Yes.
Yeah, we're big advocates for community policing and working with the community on this show. That's effectively what policing is about. It's about the people hiring people that are willing to swear an oath to effectively, risk their lives to uphold the law. That's what the police are supposed to do. But again, policing is really about people, about sharing knowledge and about looking after each other. That's what it's supposed to be about. Professor Cree, just in relation to the situation with the police and the divide that's, there's elements of society that have really been driven against the police because of policies over the last couple of years. Is there a focus on this division going forward? Or do you know of any focus on this, ways to alleviate this and to reignite community policing? Or is this ever even on the table? Are we just looking at more of a corporatization situation where it's more fiduciary obligation to the board than duty of care to the people? Is that the way things are looking?
To me, the things are looking as though there are organisations and groups or occupational groups who are looking at how they can be allies of policing.
Interesting. Occupational groups. So would these be internal groups or external groups that need to connect with frontline police to listen to their stories and also to connect in between, almost like a liaison between the community and the police?
Yeah, well, and in examples that I'm aware of, the idea of paramedics learning how to work with police officers.
That's interesting.
Paramedics, because paramedics would normally work hand in hand with police officers all the time. There's a division now between the two.
It's not expressed as a division, but it operates like a division.
Uh-huh.
That's not here in Ireland yet. I don't think so.
Is that have you found that in the Australian context? I'll hand that one over to Harry. Have you experienced that in the Australian context?
No, I thought paramedics have got a specific job to do, and I don't know what's the implication there. They're saying that paramedics go out with police, or I don't know how that would work. I mean, that's two different sort of job descriptions. Yeah, two areas. But can I go back to university? And that my understanding is New South Wales Police have got a diploma or university course for some time now, and I think it's about an 18-month course. That's my understanding, and if that's the case, it doesn't appear to have been what we've seen the last 3 years. And what my observations are when I'm in New South Wales and watching police at various times when they're operating speaking to the public, I don't see that it's had a particularly positive effect. So I don't know that that's the direct answer. Obviously, better training awareness is always a good thing, but I don't know that purely a university requirement would help. Yeah, because that will attract a specific person with a specific IQ. But from what I've seen, I think the psychometric testing, whatever, I think this is my personal observations. I've got nothing to back this up, but I think they're recruiting, getting rid of the police officer that will use discretion and abide by the Constitution and the law, and bringing in people that psychometric testing that will be more inclined to follow orders and not question. So maybe exactly. Madonna can speak to that, but that's been my observation, and I think that's what the social conditioning. I think that's where it's all headed, and I think what we're seeing manifesting is that people have been conditioned or have been only exposed to education at a certain level, which doesn't allow them to express themselves in any other manner. And I think that's what's manifesting now. Yeah, I think that's the social engineering, unfortunately, has been very effective.
Can I speak to that, Ed?
Yeah, by all means, go ahead, Madonna.
Harry, you've said some really amazing things before. You talked about, and I'll get to what you're just saying. You're spot on. That's exactly what they're doing. They're doing psychoanalytic tests that are actually weeding out people with any EQ in them, with any emotional quotient or spiritual quotient. They're only keeping people in who literally will obey orders, right? And so, which is really interesting. But you said before about there are people who, you know, in the police force that have taken an oath to do something and then kind of, you know, you're talking about New South Wales police, you know, we're going to treat this like a virus, and they're having to do things that they didn't particularly take an oath for. And what that's called, actually, the psychological principle, you'll probably know this, is incongruence. So, and this doesn't matter. This doesn't matter for police or anyone. When you have an incongruence between what you believe yourself to be or your purpose in life and what you're actually doing, there's a disconnect. And what's happening here is you've got police officers that are having that, they're waking up going, there's a disconnect here. I never thought I would have to. I never thought when I took this job I was going to have to do A, B, C, and D. I was going to have to go against my own morals, principles, or the oath that they took. And that is another reason people get depressed. It's a massive reason, in fact. Yeah. And so I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's called do no harm. It's called do no harm. We've just seen it in the medical profession, in the paramedic profession. We've just seen it everywhere the last 3 years. All of a sudden, people have been faced with this moral dilemma that, hang on, this is not what I signed off for, and this is not what my job description says I have to do. But why am I getting these orders to do it? And here we go. And this is correct. This is manifesting as PTS and adding another layer on top of everything else that the individuals, and it's in a lot of professions, have to deal with.
And it's something you said before, Harry, that was really actually profound, was then you lose all the people with the critical thinking skills, plus the experience. And that is what I am seeing across the board. I am seeing psychologists, friends of mine who are brilliant, 30 years experience, see ya, I'm working at a cafe. I can't do this. I'm not going to do this because they can't, that disconnect's there, and they're not prepared to go against their own moral or the oath that they've taken. So I thought that was a really interesting point. And of course, the other thing is about, and this is what you've all been talking about, like a good police officer, but someone needs to define what a good police officer is. And I think, Ed, you know, you keep talking about community policing, but the reality of your job or your jobs, even my own job when I used to work in local government, is that people that get to the top usually are narcissistic or megalomaniac or on some kind of spectrum where they actually, what they do is, in order to continue to do their job and not other people not realise they don't actually know what they're doing, they bully their subordinates. And I reckon, I'd hazard a guess, I don't know, but I'd hazard a guess that goes on a lot in your industry, where you've got people who are senior officers who maybe did their training in 1975, but they don't actually know what they're doing anymore, and they're driving people into the ground, but they want to keep their status. They want to keep their job. They want to keep their badge. They've got mortgages to pay. And the way that they actually control people is to do it through fear. And therefore, because some of you have already said this multiple times, people are scared to talk to their officers or their superiors. And that is a massive problem we've got, which is not going to be fixed through university. It's not going to be fixed through, it's going to be fixed by naming the problem. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's in every industry, not just yours. Sorry, I know I talk for ages, guys, but I write notes and then I'm like, here's what I'm thinking. So, yeah.
No, everything you said is spot on, especially with senior management. Eddie and I know that from an Irish perspective. You don't have to convince us of that. But everything you said there was spot on. And it's very dangerous.
100%. Yes, it is, Declan. And, you know,
it's very dangerous that independent and critical thinking is being wiped out of young people. But therein lies the hope, because people do have an inner sense of what is right and wrong, and hopefully that will save the day. Go ahead, Eddie, sorry. No,
that's okay. I was just going to say, so folks, we've established that our policing services are in trouble. It seems to be that acute stressors are ongoing due to You know, not enough resources, members being, you know, pummeled with work, even the psychometric. I don't buy so much into the psychometric argument, because I know many fellas just tick the right boxes to get into the job just to get the job. You know, so the psychometric tests I kind of take with a pinch of salt. I believe that there's fellas of heart and critical thinking in there, but I suppose the question is well, what can we do collectively? I mean, we've a broad spectrum of people sitting on this panel here. What can we do moving forward as the people, working with the police to try and improve this situation, to get the police doing what they're supposed to be doing, is working for the people and not policing over the people in a hierarchical organisation? What do you think we can do? Can I pass that back over to Professor Cree, and then I'll go through each of you then, and we'll finish off this segment. But Professor Cree, how can we improve this situation moving forward? Who should we be appealing to? Who should we be engaging? What's your thoughts?
We need to increase the levels of EQ, emotional intelligence, and those are a special type of person who have the ability to build and construct relationships.
Mm-hmm. That to me comes back to community policing again. People that are good in that space. That's effectively what it is, building the relationship from the grassroots back up again.
Yes, but may I also add that when I worked in the justice system of New Zealand, that I was a probation officer, and I had arrest powers and community social powers.
Okay.
So part of my job was to work with the police force, the local police force, and the detective to achieve the results. And that often meant things like being able to go out onto a race course and also into a venue where there was social activity, but where there were some of the known offenders, criminal offenders. And once you enter those environments, they started to disappear because they realized you had the arrest powers from the Governor General.
That's interesting. Anybody want to come in on that?
Well, I think one of the best ways we can help ourselves is to do something for yourself, like I did over the years. When I finished my job, I left it behind me and I'd continue with my private life. And a big part of that was the gym. The gym was a great de-stressor, and I think people need to do something for themselves to de-stress. That's all I can offer on that.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, what I like to look at is well, if we're going to do anything, first of all, we have to identify the problems. And these conversations over the last couple of shows have been absolutely fantastic, because we're peeling back like layers of an onion the problems that are facing our community in general. And this business of the disconnect, people not being able to speak out and express their concerns, is a problem number one. People should be free to express their concerns. Problem number two is we seem to have a lot of support services which claim to support services and claim to support people, but don't. The question is whether they actually function in the way they're supposed to deliver. That's the question. And you know, when we see discontent within the community, when we see discontent within the police force, it's not good for a good outcome. And you know, that's what Police for Freedom as a movement. Well, Dennis, myself, Mads, and a number of others, Harry there as well. We've been trying to alleviate that division that's built up between the police. But again, one of the things that happened is I set up a number of groups here over in Australia, Police for Freedom. And again, they just become populated with people that are, you know, people have trauma. And there's a lot of traumatic posts end up in there. And again, all of that trauma is creating more noise, which disempowers members and disempowers people because of that acute stress, again, that seems to be all around us. I think we have to ground ourselves and step out of that stress and holistically look at the situation and see through the box of uniform and communicate with the human that's inside that box, because they all live in our communities, brothers, sisters, family. And, you know, that's all we are as humans at the end of the day. Harry, what's your take? What can we do about this situation? Is there anything we can do? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, first, like anything, it's got to be acknowledgement or awareness. I think the police, hopefully they're already doing it, is having lectures or making it aware to the people working in that environment that it potentially is an issue. Just identifying that there is a problem is the first thing, and then recognizing, then having an education process for the officers to have an understanding that what they're experiencing might be something, might be PTSD. Obviously, life balance, work-life balance. Just my experience in the AFP, when I started in '82, there was no such thing as occupational health and safety. And where I worked in a covert unit. We were a very close-knit team because what we were doing, pretty much it depended on your covertness, depended on being able to rely on each other. And there were issues that came up from time to time, and we dealt with them internally, and it worked well. And it was like when I did 2 48-hour shifts, and forgot the number. Necessarily mean that you're going to get the desired result, but I think community, speaking to each other, speaking to the community, and I think it's do no harm. I think if you whatever you do in life and whatever profession, do no harm. The common law principle. If you follow that, I think that would go a long way to having a better police force and a better society in any profession.
It's a great motto as well. Do no harm. Dennis, can I just pass over to you there on that? What do you think we can do to make things better? And can the People's Truth be part of this?
Yes, of course it can. I think it's very difficult to solve these problems with police because they changed so much in the organizations the last 10 years, 20 years, and now we see the results. So we mustn't think that we can change this in one day or 1 month. It will be a long process. And with Police for Freedom, we organize meetings with former police officers. We try to create a safe haven. There's also active police officers, and I think the meetings in person. It will be something like a union, but different, like not paid by the government. And the other thing is we have the People's Truth. We're building an international system where everybody can put information and talk to each other. There's a chat function in the system. It's not controlled by Google or Dropbox. We build it ourselves. It's on our own server, and we want to expand these servers all over the world. I'm talking to Ed now to connect with the Dutch, the server in the Netherlands, to a server in...
The overall thesis of the book.
Sorry?
The overall thesis of the book is, if you look around the country, whether it's the border,
I've got some technical issues. I can't make anything of that.
I don't know who that was. Who was that? You, Madonna? Cutting in?
No, not at all. I'm not at all. I've no idea what that was.
Okay. So I talk on. So we're building this system. We are going to spread this system all over the world for researchers, police officers, and also journalists. We can put information in it. We can make projects in it. You can put documents in it. You can chat in it, and it's safe. And so we can create a web all over the world with a system we own. It's like a police system, but then for the people, the former police officers, and the groups can communicate in it. And we try to, because we don't have systems, and that's the biggest problem. We need everybody's chatting with each other on Signal, WhatsApp, email, and everything gets lost. So we need to have a central system, and that's what we're building at.
So it's very interesting. So it's a communication platform of experienced members with current members discussing the problems, gathering evidence that's needed to store it there, and to possibly work together with the existing police as well. So coming in there at the back end, I suppose, is to support. That's where we're coming from.
Yeah. So and people are connecting to us when there's no way to get help from the government or the police, when they're feeling left alone in the society. They're connecting to us already and asking us, can you help? And if you have a system that, where police officers and former police officers can work in, they can work together on distance. So you can help each other and chat with each other in this system.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. So I want to thank everybody for coming on to this show here. Just we're finished up part 4 here now, and I think we can roll on, because there is a direct connection with the next section, which is how the police are policing events differently around the world. If you all want to stay with me for. Okay, so we got the drift of that. Did we all get to see that?
Yes,
Yeah.
I saw it.
Yeah.
So shall I explain what you see in the video? Because this is in the Netherlands. It's the difference in approach from the police to the COVID demonstrations in 21 and 20. And now, 23, the demonstrations for the climate change, like and this group is named Extinction Rebellion, and they're protesting for a better climate, and they're getting all the help from the police to get on the highway and to sit there, have a sit down with 100 or 200 people, and there's no violence against them. You saw the water throwers. It was 30 degrees, and it was really nice for them to get a cold shower that day. And the water throwers, were different in 21 with the COVID demonstrations. They were very violent, and the dogs and everything. So this is what we see now, that this group is now has been on this same spot on the highway in the neighborhood of The Hague every day, and nobody stops them. The police is walking with them to the highway, and they sit down, and the police helping them stop the cars. And I think it's strange that the police officers have the duty to not to do something about this, and they don't. It's strange, like different than 21.
So this is bigger than this is bigger than liaison. You know, I mean, there was no justification for that water cannon, as I saw there. There was no justification for that at all, or even the use of the water cannon in that environment.
No, the girl didn't do anything, and it was like a really strange behavior. She had a lot of injuries, and it's strange.
This different. We're seeing things getting intensifying over in Ireland as well, between the Garda and members of the public, because of all the complexities taking place over there at the moment. they're being directed in to move people from protests outside of Government House. We've seen this. You know, there's certain situations whereupon if there's egress or access being blocked to premises where the police will have to move people off of the roads. But I mean, what's the solution here, Dennis? It's work to rule seems to be the way forward to deal with all of this. Just working to rule and rule of law. But when we see images like that, what it shows is that members are effectively just doing what they're told without thinking.
Yeah, I think they need to figure out that they are being used by the government, because if the demonstration is critical to the government, there's a lot of violence. And if the demonstration is in the same way as the agenda, like climate change and everything, then everything is possible and facilitated. And people, the police officers have discretion. They have their own discretion. They can figure out what they need to do for the people and not what the government asks them to do.
This comes back to an action of rule of law. Harry, we've seen this over here as well. I know I was involved, and Dennis, Mads, you were also. Mads is just gone. He's head away, but we've been involved in doing police liaison between various groups at various protests over the last couple of years. You know, and when there was no police liaison, there's obviously a field set where the rules of engagement are not clear, and chaos can ensue. But if we have a situation whereupon rules of engagement are being overstepped by the police, I mean, what can we do about that as a people and the police together? Because the police are going to be affected by this, the front line themselves. If they're just following directions from upstairs without question, this is going to be creating more acute stress again for the members that are there in that front line, and it's going to escalate the tensions and escalate the negative outcomes. Harry, have you experienced this as well, a difference in policing at different events that you may have been at or heard of up your way?
Yeah, there's been many instances, but obviously where we've been in under the banner of with the police there, it was Cops for Covered Truth or Cops for Truth. We always tried to speak to the police there who was in charge and just try and reinforce that, you know, people are here to express their views in a peaceful and non-violent manner and try and keep it at that level. But I'm curious with the Netherlands, did the farmers, did they get the same response as the rebellion, or were they treated differently to Extinction Rebellion, whatever that they were protesting there? How did that go in the Netherlands? Because we didn't. I saw some of the film clips and that. I'm just curious to see how the police handled those protests or those rallies over there in the Netherlands. Were they treated like the COVID ones, or were they given a fair go?
No, I'll let Dennis. Dennis, you can take that one.
Dennis, yeah.
Of course. They were treated like the COVID demonstrations, and
that's what I thought. Yeah,
maybe harder, more violent. There was one incident that the one tractor wanted to drive home. There was a blockade. The farmers were not allowed to drive further. The police stopped them, and one tractor wanted to drive home. Didn't do anything violent, and the police shot at this tractor and almost.
I was going to say, yeah. I remember seeing that. I was going to ask, there was firearms pointed or used? Yeah. So.
Used. They almost hit the guy, and it was a young boy in this tractor, 16 years old. And it was like 10 centimeters from his head.
And did anything eventuate from that? Was there a review, or that's just sort of gone by the way, and that was justifiable action?
Yeah, they tried to justify it first. The police made an explanation in the papers or in the news that the tractor was driving into the police officers. And then there were too many videos that show different, and then they pulled that back.
Yeah, look, it just seems to be a consistent sort of consistent, how would you say it, consistent system of conduct going on here, that if it's something that's going along with what the government is pushing, that doesn't seem to be a problem, but anything else, there seems to be police going out there and making a physical, giving the orders to make to actually be there and make it as difficult as possible, if not act outside the scope, because it's supposed to be as much force as is reasonably necessary. And we saw that in Victoria with that individual being slammed at the train station. I think it was a granny that was trampled. Yeah, so there just seems to be this disconnect.
Can I also say, like, we also had the BLM protests in Melbourne. Do you remember that? Which was at the height of COVID. And I remember that really well, because I remember that during every other, protest for people's freedom and lockdowns ending and all the rest of it ended up generally in some kind of argy-bargy with the police being quite aggressive. I mean, rubber bullets, all the rest of it. But I'll never forget that BLM protest, because, again, it was at the height of BS19, and they actually there were members of parliament who were sanctioning this protest when every other protest, the narrative, which of course the media controlled the narrative, was that they were tinfoil hat, right wing, conspiracy theorists, and it was bad for everyone's health because they were going out and not wearing masks and not social distancing. And not all of them. Some of the protests they did, some of they didn't. But certainly this BLM protest, there were tens of thousands of more people there, completely peaceful, and the police just kind of didn't do anything about it. But so it's obvious that when it supports the agenda, the police have, their orders, and they it's that incongruence you were talking about earlier, Harry, because it's about them having to, put in place what they have to put in place, and it's obvious. And the hardest thing I think for the police is this: how then do you justify? You become then for public, you become untrustworthy because it becomes obvious. You're obviously using brutal force or unnecessary force for one thing, but not another thing. But the other thing that I thought was unbelievable, and when I saw your footage, Dennis, it made me think of it, and I've been thinking of it the whole time I've been speaking. I remember watching a protest, and it was on St Kilda Road, and they started, the police started using pepper spray, and I don't know if you remember this. This would have been in 2020, the end of 2020 or early 2021, and the police started using pepper spray on people, and there was a young police officer that didn't want to do it, and you could see it was in the footage. It was, people were showing footage, real-time footage and everything, and I was watching this in real time, and I watched it back. This young police officer didn't want to do it, and his superior grabbed him by the scruff of the throat, hit him around the head a few times, and shook him and was like, you're going to do it. Get it out and spray them. And I thought, and I remember, because I remember doing a live on that moment and showing it, thinking, oh my God, this is awful, because it was really obvious that this younger member was using his conscience and thought, I don't want to do this, this isn't right. And he got not just bullied into it, it was physically, you're going to do it now. And I thought, this is awful. And so it goes to what we were saying before. There are police members who want to use their critical thinking, who possibly don't want to be doing this, who understand that it's not reasonable force and can use their discretion, but not when, their superiors around. And I will never forget that. It was really stuck out to me as the exact issue that we've got. Anyone that can think for themselves, get out of the way, just do what you're told. And the police force is a hierarchical structure, and it works because people do what they're told. Do you know what I mean? It's that weird dichotomy. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's because in some ways I would think you would have all had situations where you've had to say to a partner, or you've had to say to someone, like, get out of the way now, just do what you got to do now. And you don't want questions asked because, do you know what I mean? You're in that position. And then there's other times where they need to use their discretion. How do they know? So it's a really interesting one, but I'll never forget that for the rest of my life. It's awful.
I remember that incident. Yeah, I remember that incident, Madonna, and I remember it well. But I remember I was doing a lot of liaison with the Specialist Operation Group at the time, and it was a strange situation because they were being directed by control, as I understand. and they would lose control of the situation if people were deemed to have broken the restrictions that were put in place. So if people were getting into more than a group of 10, they would get a direction that they had to disperse. But this public order unit would get involved in the dispersal, and they were quite full on. They were full on. But the question I had was, well, who was giving these directions? Were these directions coming from somebody within the police, or were they coming from one of these appointed health officers working within the control environment? And because nobody has access, or we didn't have access to actually look at the incidents to see where the order came from, it's not clear. There seems to be a smoke and mirror situation there. So maybe it's the case where the people get more connected with the actual incidents, the recordings of the orders being given and all the rest of it, which they're entitled to get a copy of in an investigation. But there was a lot of smoke and mirrors, and there was a lot of smoke and mirrors as well in relation to the adjutant elements in the crowds as well, right? So what we have we have this mixture, and it seems to be on both sides. Within all of these different events, we have agents on both sides, within the police and within the groups that are there, which seem to be operating outside of the intention of the people that are there, just to stir it up and to escalate. I'm all into de-escalation, but there seem to be elements there escalating it, and specifically in these areas, the Charlie 19 situation, any of them protests, same, the farmers, the same. So it brings us back to question, well, how do we get to the bottom of where this agenda is coming from within the organisation itself, and how do the people get involved, to work with them to root this out?
I don't know, people. I don't know whether this is the issue. I can see it immediately is that police, just by virtue of the fact they wear a blue uniform, right, and they swear an oath, and we see them as a form of power, right? And so how do people, like just citizens, I guess you call them, how do just normal people bridge that gap when they're feeling like the gap's got to be bridged with someone who actually has the power and control to make an arrest, to use unreasonable force? It's a really hard one, Ed. Like, for me, it's about, everyone should be treated with dignity and respect, including police officers. And usually when you speak to, I've never had an issue. I mean, I find them really funny. They're funny. They're gregarious. They laugh. They'll have a go. They'll have a crack. It's if you treat people with, dignity and respect, but it has to come the other way as well. And they're people in a position of power. Let's face it. I know people. I've had the fortune over the last 4 years to speak to people in all sorts of areas. But certainly I've had police members tell me, I feel different when I put that uniform on. I feel more powerful. It gives me a sense of, and they do. I've had parking officers tell me the same thing. It's a uniform. It's like a cloak. It's like it gives me more power. And so, that's certainly, I think, how people feel about police officers as well. And it can become very intimidating, I would say. Wouldn't you say? Or is it maybe because that was your profession that you don't feel that power imbalance? It's more collegial, maybe. I don't know.
I think what you're talking about is the cliquey sensation. So guys are in the clique. We're in the job. This is us. This is us together, sort of thing. This camaraderie is what you're talking about. And that's what it is. It's a sense of when the community is gone against the police in terms of there's been a lot of negative incidents like that one there, the shooting incident over in Holland. People are losing faith in the police. There's more aggression then towards the police, and then the police are under acute stress, bullets. And then we got instances where they're lashing out. Say again.
So the rubber bullets in Victoria. Yeah,
100%. The rubber bullets down in Victoria. I mean, we done a show on this a couple of weeks back, Harry, where all of the directions that were given there completely overstepped any international recommendation and study that had been done. Right.
Well, we had there was an incident in New South Wales where out west somewhere, when New South Wales had that really severe lockdown, the western suburbs, while Bondi and went along and went to the beach and whatever. And there's one there was actually the police smashed down a fence because the occupants wouldn't tell them who was in the house. Yeah, like they just
remember that.
took the whole fence down. Yeah, like I mean, apart from the pregnant mum with the baby at Hyde Park, look, there's so many incidents. But my question is, and the bigger question is, this has happened. Same thing happened all over the world, everywhere. So obviously, who's driving? Where are these orders coming from? Obviously, it's the WHO and the UN, whatever. And why did people just so quickly just go along with it? I mean, it's just really bizarre behaviour. I mean, and unfortunately, here in Australia, they don't teach you the Constitution at school. They don't teach you what money is, and they don't teach you to be an entrepreneur and do no harm. All these things. And I think what we're seeing now over the decades is what's manifesting now, where unfortunately people just don't know and just the public bury their head in the sand, and the psychological operation based on fear worked very well over the last 3 years, and they're still trying to push it. And I think there's all these factors going on, and people, like I said, don't want to get involved, there's just so many things going on, and that's what we're seeing manifesting not only in the police but in all sectors and in every profession.
Yeah, no, we're definitely saying you nailed it there, Harry. It's these acute stressors that we've been talking about today. Yeah. And it's not
I think
just
education,
it's across the board. Yeah,
it's
making people apathetic.
Yeah. Look, I've been banging this for the last 3 years and telling people on my socials, learn the Constitution, get your rights, step out, find out what's going on, get involved, write to your member. But people just, it's very hard when they've conditioned to act in a certain way and or can't see the reality, where there's a disconnect between the reality and what they believe is going on, which is their reality, and what the actual reality is of what's really going on.
I think what I'm finding is, Harry, there's too much going on for people even to begin to look at it, because it just becomes too much. They just get swamped with too much information. For me, it's very simple. We just talk to each individual about what their problem is, how it's affecting them, what harm is being affected, is being imposed upon them. And, if we do that at a community level, like, ex-members like ourselves can help get that process going in the community. I'm trying to do it with a little whiteboard thing where I stand once a week and invite people to come over to tell me what their problem is. And then we can peel back the layers and we can say, okay, well, how is this happening? And, then we can get into the supports. Okay, well, if there's support structures there, are they actually effective? Because we know there's a lot of corruption in there as well. And you being an anti-corruption guy, you'd know all about that. That would help us peel back the layers if we compartmentalize the problems.
Yeah. Well, there's just so much going on.
Too much.
And you can see it now.
Sorry, Harry, sorry.
No, go.
I just wanted to ask you, gentlemen, if you were aware, and I've just brought it up on my computer, like I've got the article, but I remember doing a live on this, and it says 6 months ago, the article, but I can't believe it was that long. But anyway, that the Victoria Police Chief came out and actually talked about, so the Victoria Police Chief warns officers, this is an article, they're not above the law after rising disciplinary incidents. And I remember, this is, I've forgotten his name, Victoria Police Chief Shane Patton, is that his name? Yeah. The police commissioner, sorry. So how's this in a weird roundabout thing? I remember kind of discombobulating about it when it happened. Publicly warned his force that they were not above the law after a jump in disciplinary hearings last year, right? Now, but here was the thing. It really had nothing to do with the protests per se, but then he actually called for people to send in incidences of where they thought that the Victoria Police had been out of line. And I thought, what is going on here? Because, I mean, I can't believe that anyone would actually say to him, oh, hey, how you going, mate? Yeah, look, could you have a look at this footage from 2020? I'd really like this guy looked into. I mean, I can't imagine anyone wanting to put themselves forward for that. But I thought, what a weird thing for him to say. Sorry, Harry, Yeah,
it's called PR exercise, damage control.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought this is not going to go anywhere. It's kind of lip service. Again, the media run the narrative. So this is really for the people who, well, let's face it, the people that weren't protesting, actually, the media narrative ran so that people were against protesters, and there were a lot of people in the news feeds in the comment section, which is a wealth of information, saying that they wish the police had shot them, they wish the police had run them over.
Yeah.
They really felt that, because again, and what Dennis showed before is you've got climate change. The protests look like they're doing something for the community, rather than the COVID protests look like they were doing something against the community. So if you think about the actual narrative, everyone's going to die if you don't wear a mask, blah, blah, blah. So the police almost have that, justification for what they're
one of who was it, police, so they went out to China. They all went down to Chinatown to in the crowds when that was happening. It's just all this bizarre behaviour. But look, and you're getting not only that, you're getting the bureaucrats now. A lot of people all over the world trying to walk it back after what's gone on, because obviously with what's gone on and what's been happening with all the injuries and things like that, all of a sudden people are walking back, people have resigned, and they're trying to walk it back and try and put it under the carpet and forget about it, sort of thing. And we've just seen what's happened with the COVID inquiry. We're not going to have a Royal Commission. We're going to have, and if you have a look who's chairing it, it's pretty much, they've appointed people who are going to get the desired result, which is zero.
Yeah.
We're not
I did a live on that this morning. Yeah.
It's crazy. But this has been. We've had 2 Royal Commissions into child abuse that have gone nowhere really. They've just scratched the surface. If you look at the statistics, and if you look at what happened at the Wood Royal Commission with the suppression order, and this is just a continual thing where, and I think the bottom line is education, awareness, and having the conversation with people. Because I still run into people still don't know there's a 90-year suppression order. And you can't. There's video there in this. And that's what I think that's what we've got to do, and try and educate. But it's very hard because a lot of people don't want to know, or it's too hard, or don't understand, and it's cognitive dissonance. It doesn't go the possibility that higher up there's an issue higher up, and we've got the NACC at the moment that they're being bombarded. There's a lot of investigations being started with corruption at the Commonwealth level, so that's going to be interesting to see where that leads as well.
Yeah, I really think again the grassroots is the way for this, because
definitely.
Yeah. Dennis, you want to come in there before we close this one off, Dennis?
Yes, Madonna said something interesting. It's the biggest problem we have is mainstream media. So they are framing things, and they are putting the information to the public like how they like to see it. The people see it. And we can do something about that, about this awareness. We need to gather the information that we have. Madonna has some videos about the difference in approach, and maybe different people in our groups have video, and we have like maybe now 50 gigs of video footage in our system. And if we can gather TPT, if we can gather like from all over the world this footage, we can make I would like, and I'm searching for people who can do this, or work together with me, to make an international documentary, 50 minutes with a lot of information, and that we can and we have the power now with all our groups international to make this to let this video go viral.
Yeah. It needs to get out there. And again, if we've got many instances of the same approach, well, then it's circumstantial. We've got this circumstantial involvement all around the different jurisdictions. What's happening here?
Yeah, look, we haven't got the same thing going on now with this, the voice, the referendum. I mean, there was that professor that spat at someone, and apparently police have taken 50 statements, this, that, and the other, and there's still no charges or anything. So, this is a professor from ANU. So obviously, and that Monaro, that division there, I think it's the same same division there down there that I think that tasered the 95-year-old that ended up in the hospital and then actually died from an aneurysm. You know, yeah, remember that one? I mean, I mean, how do you elderly lady holding a knife with a walker? How do you taser? How do you just not walk out of the room and let it settle? I mean, I still can't get my head around that. I mean, I mean, nothing ever shocks me. That one sort of, I'm in disbelief. You know, disengage. There's no reason for force in that, especially if when they've been before it's a mental patient, dementia. You know that they're not doing it because there's no spite or whatever. It's because of their condition. You know, just disengage. I mean, who was in danger there? You know, like even Batten knocked the knife out of the hand. I don't know what was going on there. So yeah, there's this big disconnect. I don't know. You know, like you know, like I said, I go out everywhere and everyone I speak to, I engage with them, try and have a conversation and say, do you know this? Do you know whatever? And that's all we can do, and just make it real as you can and get the conversation going.
I think, Harry, like you, Dennis, you know, Ed, the people who were all on this panel, the people who actually were working in that industry had such an important and weighted voice in this. Like, I can say to people stuff, but if I say it about my industry, well, then it's like, okay, she knows because she's a counsellor or she's in psychology and she knows. But if it actually comes from people who are police members or in the AFP, it has so much more weight, which is why I think this conversation is actually really brilliant. And I know you're going to record it and put it out there, which I think is really fantastic. But I think the other thing that you've touched on, and actually everyone has, Dennis, Ed, is it's not just about BS19. It's not just about what happened during COVID in inverted commas, but it's about saying the system is broken. The system is broken. This isn't just about, because that's what COVID came to teach us, right? So it's like the system doesn't work here, because look at the system. The system works when it's something for the system, when it's about climate change or BLM and it's sanctioned by the powers that be or the masters. But when it's not, the system is completely broken. And then look at the voice. Look at anything else you've mentioned, the elderly lady who got tasered and eventually died. The system is not working, and that's what the problem is actually with the police force, is the system's broken, and it's a really
And there was another angle that we don't learn the full of the commissioner left. He went to PwC, and there's some issues there that have been looked at. But the current commissioner, when it first happened, she omitted information from the press release as to what actually happened. Now, if you did that and went to court, that's perverting the course, perjuring yourself. And and that's a new commissioner that's come in that's supposed to change and be for this and for it just seems to be that no matter what happens, these people just keep compounding the same mistakes with more mistakes, and not being open. And what are they hiding? It's just crazy sort of stuff. And the fact that what happened was bad enough, then you don't want to release which is going to come out anyway. In the end, it does. All the information comes out. You can't escape the truth. Eventually, it all rises to the surface. So there's all these things here. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Sorry, Ed.
Sorry, Madonna. Go ahead.
No, can I just finish? Can I just finish on that point? Look, a good way to try, and I don't think the system would ever allow it, is like people like us to go in to current police areas and talk to the police and speak about all these topics and get them to start questioning things. But I mean, the system's not going to allow that, because they don't. I can't see this isn't going in this ex-police about P.T.S.D. and other. You can go in there and start talking about the things, but I don't think the system would ever allow that, and because the problem is the system.
Yeah,
I agree 100%, Harry. But we can turn it around in terms of we can start talking to the people about the impacts. Because people can make complaints about the impacts. So that's where I'm starting is, I don't want to say anything. I just want to listen. Like a call taker in a dispatch centre. What is the problems? Give me the incidents. Who's the injured party? Okay. How have you been impacted? Right? Now let's peel it back. And then, and if we're doing that in each locality, I find it incredible. I'm down here in Melbourne, just local to Upwey, and there's no community policing here. The nearest community policing is Lilydale, and they're called the Proactive Policing Unit. Now, I've contacted them to come down and to engage with me with the whiteboard concept, to listen to what the complaints of the public are, listen to what their sentiment is. and to try and connect with them at the community level, because as you know, the lower rank police are a different entity to management. So we need to connect with the lower rank guys, but I firmly believe that we should start some sort of initiative similar to protect the police for the people through education and communication, and starting in the grassroots. Let's let the people first vent. What is your concerns? Let's look at each concern and treat it like an incident, and then look at solutions, look at supports, see what are really working as supports, what are really working as solutions, and what doesn't have any solutions offered. And that way we can really work together across the board and get an understanding of what the rules of engagement are with the police as well, in particular to demonstrations and protests, because this business of it being policed differently really needs to be looked at with a finite magnifying glass. You know, going the whole way through the thing. Where's this order coming, you know, from? Well, why is there dispersal orders being given for one and not for the other? And this is where experience can come into the play, understanding how things are supposed to be as against the way they're being presented. You know, even with there was a campaign for the Yes campaign down here in Melbourne during the week, and there were people there from Beyond Blue were involved in the political campaign as well. Now, Beyond Blue are supposed to be non-political, as are the police supposed to be non-political. They're supposed to be completely in the middle with no position on this, you know. But it concerns me when you have political agenda getting into services that should be apolitical in nature. You know, a question needs to be asked there. Why is this happening? Yeah. But anyway, look, to wrap it up, guys, I'll let go on. Madonna, you're coming in. I'll let you finish off on the last point and then we'll wrap it up.
Cool. Thank you, Ed. I just wanted to say, you know, you're talking about we've all been talking about for the last hour about, you know, protests and how police are, you know, different protests. But at some point, Ed, there has to be some kind of acknowledgement that maybe the way to protest going forward is not bodies on streets.
Yes.
That we actually have to think in a very, in a more creative way. And Dennis was just said one before. Think about everything's digitalized, right? Everything's online. TikTok's a huge influence, right? Maybe it's about actually, you know, there's this amazing, I mean, I don't know if you've done it close to all the time with, you know, my young people as a youth worker, but it's about if you've got someone, I used to, you know, put my hand up against someone's hand and say push. If you're pushing and I'm pushing, right, there's resistance. But if I let go, there's no resistance. You fall over. So it's about saying, like, where's the path of least resistance? And so maybe it's about actually saying, let's just acknowledge, I mean, this is what they do. We know what they do. We know what the agenda is. And it's written in lockstep. Why are we doing the same thing over and over again, getting no results? Correct. I know it's a great place for people to meet and all the rest of that blah, blah. But, and I don't want to say that, you know, flippantly, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, actually, let's get creative about how we're telling whoever what we want to tell them. And I think the time has come to say, you know, we know that there's going to be a certain amount of risk if you go out because we know exactly what the agenda is and we've seen it clearly. Dennis just showed it to us. This is what's happening. So maybe, I mean, we just need to look at a different way forward. And I think that's, you know, what Dennis is talking about is a great idea. It has to be a different way to protest, you know.
And this is it, Madonna. This is it. This communication, conversations like this, you know, in the canteen, like I say, without trying to knock on the door, when we just talk to people outside of uniform, people who have been in uniform, we make the connection between the human to human and we work together like reasonable people to try and find solutions. You know, because what I see is a system that's using people against each other, seems to be using people against each other, I say, and setting up an interface which is always escalated into some sort of a negative outcome. And so we need to be wiser and we need to be smart about this and to really get back to looking after our people because, you know, the system is broken and we have a broken society, sadly. But look, guys, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come on board for today's show. And next week, we're going to do a show on moving forward and collaboration with some other different, we have the lifesavers down there in Phillip Island. I'll be talking to Johnny Cantoni tomorrow about collaborating with a couple of the other frontline groups for a few shows going forward as well. And I'd welcome you all to come on back, of course, to continue the conversation. So we'll finish out with a tune. And thanks everybody for this week on the Cops Canteen. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Ed.
What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? When you were 8 and you had bad traits, you go to school and learn the golden rule. So why are you acting like a bloody fool? If you get hot, then you must get cool. Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? Or what you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? Or what you gonna do when they come for you? You chuck it on that one, you chuck it on this one, you chuck it on your mother and you chuck it on your father, you chuck it on your brother and you chuck it on your sister, you chuck it on that one and you chuck it on me. Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Nobody now give you no break. Police now give you no break. That old soldier man I give you no break. Not even your eyes now give you no breaks. Well, hey, bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Why did you have to act so mean? Don't you know you're a human being? Born of a mother with the love of a father. Reflection comes and reflection goes. I know sometimes you wanna let go. Hey, 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 I know sometimes you wanna let go. Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? You're too bad. You're too rude. You're too bad. You're too rude, yeah. Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? You chuck it on that one, you chuck it on this one, you chuck it on your mother and you chuck it on your father, you chuck it on your brother and you chuck it on your sister, you chuck it on that one and you chuck it on me. Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for